G'day, welcome back. I'm very sorry that an episode did not come out yesterday. I once again muted my microphone. And for just your information, the reason that I keep doing that is because it's not just in the software that I use, it's also because my microphone has a mute button on it, and I keep pressing that thing. And then I don't take a look before an episode and think to myself, maybe I should check if I'm actually speaking at all. So when I went to edit the thing, it was completely gone. It was 10:30 at night and I was at a conference all day. I was exhausted and the idea of filming another episode was just terrifying considering the fact that I had to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning. But in today's episode, we're going to get into how the Labor Party is tackling the One Nation problem. One Nation's rise and their astronomical surge in the polls. How is it that the Labor Party is planning and currently tackling One Nation? We take a quick look at a Cumberland councilor who has decided to try and change the names of his local wards from names related to mayors and local people into indigenous names, which will likely have nothing to do with the local area. And finally, we're just going to do a quick dive into Candace Owens, the evil that she is portraying in the current statements that she is making and the series that she is planning on bringing out, entitled, for some reason, The Wife of Charlie. We're going to get into all that and more on the Mark Pirotta Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blaster! Welcome to the Mark Pirotta Show.
Before we get into things, I just want to have a quick chat about the conference that I've been attending for the last 2 days, specifically around one very large topic, which is dominating the Australian public sphere in today's political and our household landscapes. At the end of the day, what most people are worried about are three main things. It is the bottom line of their budget, it is their safety and their security, and it is the future of their children. Now, this conference tackled all of those things, but one of the main topics that we were discussing consistently throughout this was the energy policy in this country, specifically around renewables and the disdain that the average left-wing politician and person in this country has for the coal sector, for the oil sector and the gas sector, the generators that have given us the prosperity that we all enjoy today. We heard that there is a general and a direct correlation between a country's wealth and the amount of energy that they produce. And that is not an inverse relationship. It is that however much energy a nation produces is effectively how prosperous you can assume that they will be. Places like Rwanda do not produce nearly enough energy to make the people prosperous because it is not cost effective for them to do so. In this country today, we have projects planned, we have indoctrination centers, and we have a general issue with the fact that coal, gas, and oil are things that have effectively been able to keep the lights on for our entire history. The push for renewables is almost strange. The way that we've seen it astronomically rise through the ranks of importance has been very, very odd to see from effectively the 1980s until now. But as we've seen with Bill Gates turning his back on the project and saying that the ultimate human good is more important, and with many businesses opting for that same thought process. And not only are we seeing the collapse internally inside of its own structures, but we're seeing it now play out in the public sphere. The disdain that even now left-wing politicians are having to handle with public protests that are in essence disrupting everyday life in the same way that a lack of energy and a lack of reliable energy will also disrupt our everyday lives. Now, this first clip effectively indicates what it is that is the main issue with renewables. It's that they are vulnerable, they are unreliable, and at the end of the day, without subsidies, they are effectively a non-starter. Watch.
Well, there you have it, people. What's left of Vast Solar, now that they've gone broke, the demolition company's walked away. I've just had a fire. All that shiny stuff down there is glass that's laying on the ground, all smashed. We're guessing that's what started the fire yesterday. They were warned that this was going to happen, and this is the result. Just remember, this is your money, people. How much longer are we going to put up with these fucking idiots in this country?
Now, a burnt-out field of solar panels, outside of the environmental hazard that is obviously a consequence of a burn like this, where there is human-developed buildings and infrastructure being burnt. This is not a bushfire. Bushfires, at the end of the day, are a good thing for the environment. The bush needs the fire in order to regenerate itself. It is part of the normal cycle of every environment that if there is a large amount of vegetation, that needs to be burnt in order to enrich the soil so that new growth can come forth. But when a burn like this happens, and when we start to see these sorts of projects failing despite the government's intervention, and dire intervention at that, it is a sure tell that there is something changing in the climate of this country. Now, not only that, we can see it in the way that the political conversation is shifting. Not only now are the crazies attacking right-wing politicians for their views, but they're also starting to eat their own. And it is a consequence of left-wing ideology that at the end of the day, as an authoritarian movement, they will end up eating their own. Because there is no such thing as sharing and charity on the left, not in a real way. The expectation is that someone else is always forced to look after you and those who are impoverished, and it's never your responsibility to do so. And at the end of the day, despite all of the conversations that are being made and the overtures being made by the Labor government and the Greens, at the end of the day, there is no opportunity for renewables to be 100% of the grid. And so the crazies are going to come out, not only in regards to the green climate, but also in regards to threats made directly to our Prime Minister, to heckling happening directly to our Prime Minister at a conference where, despite his information likely being lies, fallacies, and a general disdain for the Australian population, it is in fact, as a portion of the office, a place that should be respected. And despite that, we still had to watch these scenes.
Hecklers
who've enrolled in free
Prime Minister, why are you selling my future to gas companies in Auckland Medicine? Say you care about my generation. You're burning my future! You're burning young people's futures!
We respectfully ask you to legislate to end fossil fuel. No more coal and gas! No more coal and gas!
It follows a bomb scare at the lodge last night. The Prime Minister was forced to evacuate his Canberra home, sheltering in a secure location for 3 hours as specialist teams swept the scene. They found nothing suspicious. When asked about that today, the PM responded with humour, saying his pet cavoodle is a tougher guard dog than she looks. But he did have a serious message too.
I think it's just a reminder. Take every opportunity to tell people, turn the heat down, for goodness sake. We can't take these things for granted. Just turn it down.
That shrill shriek of left-wing insanity. The crazy eyes of an old woman who clearly has nothing better to do with her life. It is, in essence, what we see in our political sphere today. The very old and media captured and the very young and very dumb is at this stage the epicenter of left-wing ideology. There's really good quotes that always come out, especially from people who move from the left to the right, is that when they grow up or when they got married or when they had kids and they realize that the world is not ponies and rainbows, but it is in fact a dangerous place, that it is in fact a place that requires discipline in order to ensure that the society can continue in a safe way, that almost everyone becomes a conservative. Now, there are obviously exceptions to that rule, especially in a society that devalues the idea of marriage and children so much. But at the end of the day, every single poll is showing the exact same thing. Every single poll is showing that the middle class, the working class, the average Australian is shifting towards one nation in a way that we've never seen before. We're seeing women at 34% starting to vote for One Nation. We're seeing men at about 38% starting to vote for One Nation. And those numbers are consistently rising. The only place where they're not is in the epicenters of the left-wing ideological sphere, which is the metropolitan, and I mean the deep metropolitan areas. Outside of that, anyone in the suburbs is now considering a move to the only party that is speaking up directly about the issues. Yes, often in a crass way. Yes, in a way that is not normal for our political conversation. In a way that does inspire a general disdain from those who look upon these situations with an academic lens. But where the academics fail to realize that there is a need to have these conversations in the way that One Nation is having them, Pauline and her party are doing the thing that is quite difficult, being the bulldog despite the fact that there is another set of people who would put you down if they had the opportunity. And so, in my mind, as I've said several times, there is no other option for the Liberal Party and the National Party at this stage than to do one of two things. They can either side with One Nation and allow One Nation to be the bulldogs that they refuse to be, or they can unleash the people in their ranks who have the ability to actually say the things that need to be said. Otherwise, these are the polls that we are going to continue to see. One Nation surging in a way that is effectively unstoppable. There is no political conversation that can change this. No academic conversation that can change this. This is people looking at the facts of their lives and saying, I need a different option. The parties that have existed for the better part of 100 years are not doing it for us anymore. We need change. And the only people making sense in that is One Nation. And so obviously the vitriol that is coming is going to continue to come, both from the Liberal Party if they do not pull their socks up and make the decision that needs to be made, and of course from Labor, who at this stage have been the only ones to really come out and attack One Nation. And not attack them on a policy perspective, mind you. Not attack them in a way that is, in their own ethos, political. But attack them entirely in an ad hominem way. A personal attack, which is what ad hominem means. Effectively going after them for things that are cancel culture worthy. It's the idea that you ought to be 100% perfect at all times. A simple idea that the religiosity of the left wing, which is based entirely around degeneracy unless they do not believe it is degenerate, ought to be completed entirely within your life with no exception, and if there is any stray, to cut that person off before they have the ability to get into politics. It's the Nazi equation. It's that everyone who is right-wing is somehow a fascist or a Nazi. And so we got to see Julian Hill come out with a statement which effectively lambasted anyone on the right wing of politics simply for having an opinion that differs from he himself. Anyone that differs from the left-wing agenda is somehow some sort of crazy idiot. And these sorts of statements coming from that side of politics is effectively going to stop anyone who has a modicum of respect for what Pauline Hanson has achieved in 30 years from ever going back to those parties. And what's the reasoning behind this today? Why are they suddenly coming out and making all of these statements that in essence just amount to, hey, someone wore a t-shirt that you don't like? A rich statement coming from a member of the party whose leader wore a Joy Division t-shirt, not even 6 months ago. And for those who forget, the Joy Division was a camp inside of a Nazi concentration camp where effectively women were prostituted, and by women we mean Jewish women, were prostituted, beaten, and killed as a consequence of their Jewishness, and they were used as prostitutes for the Nazis who ran the camp. And a band created a band name based upon that, and turns out that Anthony Albanese likes that band. Now, whether he knew or not what that meant, he probably didn't. But if we're going to speak about t-shirts as if there's some sort of big calling card as to what your political opinions are, then maybe we should start with the guy who calls everyone else a right-wing fascist Nazi, or to the words to those effect, while simultaneously wearing a Nazi slogan t-shirt. But this is the reason that now we are starting to see the way that Labor is going to attack the One Nation problem. Not on policy, but just on personality. On the idea that just because they are potentially less educated than you in a university sphere, that they ought to be looked down upon. And the idea, obviously, that cancel culture can still exist in our modern world. That someone wearing a t-shirt 2 years ago is somehow congruent to them not being fit to lead in a country today. Let's watch this clip.
Nation candidate has been forced to deny links to a far-right extremist group, despite photos emerging of him wearing their merchandise. Our state political reporter Gus McDonald joins us live with the exclusive details. Gus, you've spoken to him. He denies association with the group.
Yeah, he does, Brenton. That's Joel Hendry, the One Nation candidate for Port Adelaide. He's backed away from any association with the group, the True Blue Crew, despite wearing its merchandise in this photo taken in 2022. When this photo first emerged, the One Nation candidate he was campaigning with was reported to have said she regretted being seen with him. At the time, however, Mr Hendry was not running for public office like he is now. The True Blue Crew is a right-wing group with origins in Victoria, associated with violence and protests. Mr Hendry released a statement to me this afternoon saying wearing the t-shirt did not mean he was a member of the group, endorses it or has any association with it.
To see, I think in this case, the One Nation candidate for Port Adelaide quite happily wearing a t-shirt with True Blue Crew written on it and posing for a photo, I think raises all sorts of alarm bells.
Joel Hendry told me this afternoon his focus is on being a strong voice for Port Adelaide. The party itself did not want to add any further comment when contacted this afternoon. Brenton.
Now, despite that, we got to see a pretty cool photo over the weekend. And that was Senator Alex Antic, who is one of the best senators inside of the Senate at the moment, having a beer with Bernardi. Now, Bernardi, for those who don't know, is a ex-Liberal power broker from South Australia who has now, after a hiatus from politics, made the decision to join One Nation. Now, from all accounts, this is just a beer between friends, because at the end of the day, these two men worked together for quite a long time and were friendly for a long time in politics. But when you start to see these sorts of things in public, it does seem quite interesting to me that they are at this time having a beer, despite the fact that Alex Antic has made no overtures to the fact that he may join One Nation. But at the end of the day, when a party is ascendant, then this is the way that things ought to be. You shouldn't just dismiss them and pretend as though they are some sort of know-nothing burger, because if there are 30% of the population who are saying they want these people, then maybe they know better than you. And so learning from them and gaining some insight into their thought processes may not be the worst idea. And then we have the councillor from Cumberland. Now, despite the fact that he effectively can barely speak English, and in doing so displays exactly what is wrong with our immigration policy, which is, in essence, that despite an accent, you ought to be able to speak the language fluently in order at least to become a citizen, let alone to become a member of our city councils here in this country. At the very least, you ought to have a, let's call it, standard level of English education, a standard level of an ability to speak this language. We are speaking about someone here who effectively doesn't have an ability to do so and seems as though they can't do it without some sort of teleprompter in front of them. Not to say, a 15, 20-minute speech, but to simply say a speech to a camera for about a minute. And in doing so, highlights the exact issue with what is currently happening within his local council. Inside of that local council, he is attempting to change the names within the Cumberland Council area from Australian names, historical Australian names, into indigenous names. Now, the way that naming works, especially within the indigenous culture at least, is that we effectively get told who was the indigenous person of that area, and then we have to change the name into something to do with that. But there aren't that many who are actually a part of that society that we even know. And so as a general rule, you'll turn it into something that means river or mountain or waterway or walkway, anything effectively. And so it's not going to cause that much of a big deal, but it's just another idea that leans towards the issues that we're seeing in this country today, where people who are coming from overseas do not want to love this country for what it is, but want to change it into a hellhole, much like their own homes. And they may not be doing it on purpose, but the consequence of their action, where they come to this nation and think that they can serve within our parliaments, even though they've been here for all of 5 minutes, means that they do not have the backbone of an Australian. And by backbone of an Australian, I mean the central pillar of what it is that made them into an Australian. They are still portions of their own nation. They are still puppets of their own nation and citizens of their own nations. They will call themselves everything but an Australian. I'm a Lebanese, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm a this, I'm a that. But there's nothing to do with the actual portion of Australia that they are here to represent, that they are here to counsel for. They are only seriously imbuing their own opinions that they have garnered from another nation into our nation. And that, to me, is an issue. Let's watch this clip.
Just in case the mainstream media goes crazy over this one and say Ahmed is going to change the suburbs' names and bring lots of this... Yeah, bring lots of confusion, yes. I thought it's best you hear it from myself first. My upcoming proposal is not to change Oban to another name or Granville to another name. It's simply to change internally within the council the names of our wards into indigenous names. This is done to further acknowledge the 65,000 years of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people history and contribution to Australia. Again, this change will only be internal within the council and won't affect everyday life. So don't worry, your Google Maps direction is not going to change. You don't need to worry about updating your address everywhere. Oban is still Oban, 2144. Love you all.
And finally, let's get into Candace Owens. Now, I've only spoken really quite briefly about Candace Owens on this show. I never really wanted to make a massive statement about it, mostly because what I see is clips in the same way that everyone just sees clips. I'm not imbued too deeply into American politics, or at least I'm not anymore. And while I have unending respect for Charlie Kirk and for his movement and what he achieved, my mission now is to do what he wanted to do here in Australia. And so I do not see the benefit of speaking to things from the American lens, at least at this time, until such a time as to when they do begin to affect Australia, and that they show something to the morality of the world or an ideology that is affecting us here that can be mirrored in the States. Now, there's a lot of that does go on, but at the end of the day, we've got our own issues here that we can speak to. There's no point wondering about what Gavin Newsom is doing over in California when we have people over here like Chris Bowen who are doing the exact same thing. But at the end of the day, Candace Owens has taken things far too far for far too long. She has spent the better part of 4 months effectively destroying the legacy of a man who built the conservative movement in a nation that looked like it was on the brink of collapse. And by that legacy, I don't just mean his company. I mean his family. I mean his children and his wife. I mean the people that he did all of this for. At the end of the day, a man does not willingly go out into the public with the opportunity of anyone to come and effectively end his life unless there is a larger purpose in order for him to go do that. Very rarely do you see great men stand in front of the populace and do so without the backing of a family who loves him, without the idea in his head that there are children at home and that is the reason that he is doing what he is doing. And so Candace Owens, despite the fact that she has consistently attacked TPUSA, which is within her prerogative as someone who is unerringly negative when it comes to the ex-employers that she has. When you attack someone's family in the way that Candace Owens has done with no real evidence, you show a lack of grace, a lack of holiness, and a general demonic nature which cannot be overlooked. So many people have been dragged into the idiocy of what Candace Owens has been putting forward. And it is idiotic. It is colourful. It is entertaining to listen to, but it is idiotic. I mean, Rick and Morty is an interesting show that is awesome to watch, and it's got some, great colours and crazy concepts, but it is also idiotic. At the end of the day, Candace Owens has stepped too far. When you start to create a series which is without any sort of evidence, not really, then you step into the realm of destroying a man's family, his real legacy, not the business that will forget him one day, but the people who will love him forever. The children who no longer have a father and the wife who no longer has a husband. And while Candace Owens spits vitriol into a camera, When she turns it off and she goes to bed at night, lays down next to her husband, I do not understand how she does not see that what she is doing is pure evil. And so in my mind, it feels so intentional that it cannot be overlooked. Her commentary on this issue has been nothing but spiteful. When someone says a source has told me, when someone says a contact told me, or I got an email from this person, that is not evidence. That is just evidence that you read an email or that you got a tip. Where did that tip come from? Is there any actual evidence that you can point to? Just the fact that Erica Kirk smiled once, that she launched what was probably the greatest funeral service ever, and she launched it as a show in the same way that Charlie Kirk runs a show. The fact that she took over a company that was more than likely going to sink when its leader, who was the pivot point of that company, died. Candace Owens must be either moronic or evil. There is no other explanation. Because when a captain of a ship dies, tyranny takes over. Everyone wants a slice of the pie. When the leader of a nation dies, everyone wonders if they are next in line. And so by legacy building in the way that Charlie Kirk did, by installing Erica Kirk, he effectively ensured that there was no one else who was going to come knives out, that his organization would survive, that his wife would be the person who superseded him in that situation, so as to settle the ship until such a time as to when a proper CEO could be called. If anyone truly believes that Erica's calling in life is going to be to continually run TPUSA as a CEO of a company, despite everything that she and Charlie both said publicly, you must be insane. This is an intelligent man that we are speaking about. A man who read books more than pretty much anyone else on earth, who spoke more than anyone else on earth, who achieved more in his 31 years than almost anyone else on earth. There is almost no one you can point to, potentially outside of some of the great saints and some of, Jesus Christ himself, who actually did so much more than Charlie Kirk could ever achieve in that 31 years. And I don't want to compare Jesus and Charlie, but when we're speaking about great people, you can't really leave Jesus out of that mix. And so obviously he thought about this possibility deeply. And he thought to himself that the only way to ensure that his legacy continues is to ensure that his wife is the one who takes the reins until a suitable replacement could be found. So all I can say to Candace, which will never reach her ears, but I do not understand how you can be a Catholic, call yourself a Catholic, and disparage a woman, a mother, a widow in this way. Disparage her with innuendo so that you can make a pretty penny. Because that is the only thing that you are doing. You are not continuing the conversation. You are not keeping Charlie Kirk's name alive. You are disparaging the family that will continue his bloodline, that will continue his name. The son that will watch your videos one day and think to himself, is my mother a monster? Did my mother kill my father? At the end of the day, for you to do this is nothing short of demonic. You can tell me I've been paid to say that, but at the end of the day, everyone on earth had the same gut reaction as long as they were not captured by your idiocy. This is not a psyop that is intended to destroy Candace Owens. This is the genuine gut reaction of fathers, mothers, and children everywhere who see their own mothers in Erica Kirk, who see themselves in the children of Charlie, who see their own children in the children of Charlie. The gut reaction of people who care about their families more deeply than they care about making a dime. And I hope and pray that you think about that before you put out your next video. Because I don't think that Jesus, if I'm being very honest, and I can't again speak for him, would really love this situation right now. What you are trying to achieve, what you are trying to do. Innuendo is not fact. A tip is not evidence. And your commentary is not adding to the collective good. That'll do us for the show today. My name is Mark Pirotta. I'll speak to you guys tomorrow. God bless.